games, Brrraaains A Head-Banging Life here. Welcome to the Nasties, and it is time. It is time to talk about the most famous film on the list. One of the unprosecuted ones, of course, but probably the one that I think most people would be surprised exists on the list, that it was ever a video nasty. Yeah. But if you do know the Nasties, this is the one that everybody knows more than anything else. It is, of course, 1981's The Evil Dead, directed by Sam Raimi, starring Bruce Campbell. Now, this was released with 2 minutes of cuts in 1990, but it's been in cuts since 2001. What I find fascinating about that is those that say they grew up with this film probably never ever saw an uncut version when they were youngsters.
Yeah, definitely not.
You are one of the people then, a good example, because you're one that says, oh, I used to watch all the time when you were younger. Yeah. But if it wasn't released uncut until 2001.
Then definitely would have watched it about them 2 minutes in.
Absolutely. So, factoids. I'm going to read this exactly as it is. The film's release was met with controversy. Obviously, it's a nasty. Raimi made the film as gruesome as possible with no interest or fear in censorship, leading to a classic rating, X.
Yeah.
That's obviously porn. Disturbing, highly violent, disturbing films are often considered pornographic. X-rated, which is not what you want your horror movie to be.
No.
While it obviously isn't pornographic in nature, it was considered one of the most violent films of its time, and obviously censors had issues with the film's content, which obviously impacted its commercial potential. It did alright in the end. Yeah. The film was actually called the #1 nasty, because while it was labelled as a video nasty, it was also the year's best-selling video release. Along with Cannibal Holocaust and A Spit in Your Grave, it's been described as one of the most notorious splatter films of its day. The film was banned on video in some countries. However, this is very important. It's never been officially banned outright. I think that's quite important there, because you automatically presume every nasty was, but not everyone was. No. The Evil Dead, 1981. What's to say about this movie that hasn't been said before? It's really interesting that I don't think people get confused between this and the sequel. I think they get confused about what elements exist between Evil Dead and the Evil Dead 2. Yeah. And there are elements where you forget what's in what and what's in another. The easiest way to remember it is the Evil Dead, the original, is not a horror comedy. No. Whereas the Evil Dead 2 is very much a horror comedy. So you get a lot more aspects on that. Now, me personally, I still prefer Evil Dead 2. I do. I think the story is better written. I think the characters are better. And I think the acting chops of the likes of Bruce Campbell had grown so much to be more enjoyable.
How many years between that and that one?
I'm not sure. I am not sure. What to call it? Oh, there we go. 1987. So 6 years. That's a good 6 years. A considerable amount of time for things to progress and stuff like that. The Evil Dead, the original 1981 film that we're talking about here, is out and out a horror movie. It is in very much so. Question now, having rewatched it, do you think it's a good horror movie?
I think sometimes you do tint things and go, oh, it's classic. I definitely watch it loads and loads. So like other horror films, I'd put back on again and again. I don't know if I'd put this one on repeatedly. I don't know.
I'm kind of like, it's a good movie for its time. Yeah. I think it's aged badly in places, and rewatching it, there are elements that I find to be that stop the movie dead in its tracks almost. Forget slowing down, just stop it dead. And you're like, oh, please something happen. Let's move on. But there are so many great things to admire about it, and one of the things that I think really does make it a great horror movie, when it's a good horror movie, is the camera work. Yeah. The way it's filmed, how it looks, the visual lighting and affects the location, all of that makes it fucking phenomenal. Yeah. Really is. Sam Raimi is an incredible talent for stuff like that. Where I don't think it's good is I don't think the acting is that good until a certain point. Yeah. I think up until anyone becomes a demon, they are wooden, not believable as characters. No. But when then asked to be a demon, these actors seem to have a fucking ball. And that's where it's incredibly entertaining. Bruce Campbell as a lead in this movie, it's obviously his starring role would come in a sequel. He's okay in this. Yeah. He's an intriguing looking fellow, but ultimately this is not Ash When we think of Ash Williams, we don't think of this version of Ash, who's a little bit chicken shit, a little bit cowardly, a little bit of a wet blanket a lot of the times. Certainly not the chainsaw holding badass that we would get in Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, Ash vs. Evil Dead, and so on. Not the stuff you expect. That came later. So again, if you've never seen The Evil Dead somehow, and you're thinking, oh, let me go back and watch this original film, you're in for a shock in that regard. I also think it's very, very worth remembering that Evil Dead 2 isn't a sequel. No. It's effectively a remake. You know?
Yeah.
And that's what it is. I think most people know that, but just in case you don't. It needs to be said. Evil Dead 2 was them redoing it, basically. Yeah. But then changing the story about halfway through, adding in new characters and so on. We have characters then. We have Ash, who we've already mentioned, Bruce Campbell. Cheryl, Ellen Sandweiss. Richard DeManicore, who plays Scott. Betsy Baker as Linda, who is Ash's girlfriend. And Teresa Tilly as Shelley. Those are characters. Yeah. So all you need to know. There are a few other listed, like the voice of the archaeologist and Sam Raimi as one of the local fishermen that you see waving on the side of the road. Basically, they're on a vacation to a cabin in rural Tennessee. This cabin is off the beaten path, and I have no idea why you'd ever want to stay here.
No, it's really creepy. Very creepy.
Forget that. Hey, let's go away from the weekend. That looks like I'm going to sleep there for an hour and die of mold in my lungs. Like, it is a horrible looking cabin. Yeah. It is not nice from the outside. Yeah. It's not nice on the inside. All right, they're university students, so let's say money's a problem, you know? So that's it. Fair enough, we'll give them that. So, just driving and talking at the start. Way to get to know the characters. Dialogue isn't great here. Yeah. It's a bit forced, a bit wooden. And the camera doesn't do a great job of picking it up. So when they're all talking, it's very hard to even really understand what anyone's fucking saying.
Underwatery.
Yeah. They have a near crash with a truck for a cheap jump scare. It doesn't work. No. It's ineffective, but it's there. And then they arrive at the cabin after going across a very rickety bridge. Yeah. Which then leads to what I think is probably the best introduction of the location. Where the camera is filming directly above the car from a distance. So you see it slowly moving up the path. And what they've done is they've cut all sound. Yeah. And so it's silent. And it's really impressive. Yeah. Really impressive. You're like, oh, okay, that's imposing. That's just a cabin, but you've made that scary. Yeah. You've made that scary. Meanwhile, in between them driving, we've had this thing where it's like the spirit, the energy is moving through the woods. Yeah. This is an Evil Dead classic. It would appear in all films, which is the sped up camera shooting through the forest.
The noise it makes.
Yeah, the kind of thing. That footage is happening at the same time. There's a good scare at the start. Let's get this one out of the way. It's brilliantly done. It's done again in the sequel for good fucking reason because it's effective. And it is the swing porch on the door that is swinging with such force, hitting the side of the wall. Like, no wind can be doing that. No. Now, how odd that doesn't make you turn around and go, nope, I'm gone, bro, kind of thing. But they are freaked out enough, and it's Scott that approaches the house to get the key, which is on top of...
the door frame.
Yeah, the door frame. Yeah. And the swing stopped moving. Yeah. It just stops moving. Now, like I said, out. Yeah. Going home. Nah, that's too weird. That's weird. That's not how things work. No. But they go in, and they're chilling out, basically. They're just hanging out and stuff like that. It's just people hanging out. There's nothing really that substantial to it, is there? You know, as characters, I mean, like I said, Ash is a bit of a wet blanket. His girlfriend, Cheryl?
Yeah, Linda.
Linda. She seems perfectly nice. Which one's his sister? Is it Cheryl? Yeah, Cheryl's his sister. Yeah. That's so understated that I didn't realise that till later on. Yeah. Rewatching
they mentioned something, didn't they?
Yeah, I think I just missed it. Yeah. And Shelley, again, she's not really there. And Scott, like, he's a loudmouth. Everything's funny to him. Like, hilarious to him. That kind of thing.
Like, what? We don't...
Yeah, a lot of the time it just doesn't work. Yeah. But there's nothing really stand out. They're just, truth be told, they're just normal people. Which I guess is kind of cool in a way. And then this film doesn't hang around at the start. So Cheryl likes to draw, and she's drawing a picture of the stopped clock. The clock. And it stops, and she hears like a voice saying, join us, a distant, faint voice. And she basically, her hand becomes possessed and she starts drawing violently on the page.
Yeah.
And she basically draws the Necronomicon, the Book of the Dead, which, you know, is quite an important piece of Evil Dead lore. That's kind of forgotten about and just left in it. You know?
I'd be pretty freaked out about that.
Yeah, then they're having dinner. Then, because the next sort of scene, they're having dinner and so on. And what... It's wonderfully done. The music makes it a bit cheesy, but the trapdoor swings open, like up, both with force. And like the music goes ding, and they like run over to it and stuff like that. It's a little cheesy. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a bit, especially after you're watching them just have a nice meal, just to have that jump in. But yeah, they want to obviously kind of ramp the film up. They want to start moving along a bit, don't they? So
yeah, which is a shame it slows down so much now. Like directly after that, it slows down to a fucking crawl. Yeah. So first, Scott goes into the basement. Yeah. And the rest wait around, and Scott doesn't answer to their calls. So Ash goes in, and Ash looks around for ages and ages and ages for what else? A jump scare. Yeah. As Scott's like, oh, look at this. And basically, he's found a little, like,
technical
office almost, a small office, where there's a couple of things, like a blade with, like, a cool skull motif on it. The Book of the Dead, Necronomicon, not the one that you're all familiar with, the earlier version of it. Looks a bit different, not the one that Ash would have put his bitten in the Army of Darkness. The one that was the special edition of the DVD.
Yeah, I had that. I love that.
Yeah. And a tape recorder. So they take it upstairs and they start to listen to it. And basically, it's an archaeologist who was digging in Egypt or somewhere like that, I think. Is it Egypt? I think it is Egypt.
It's Egypt.
Egypt. Yeah. And basically, he talks about finding, like... the Book of the Dead and talking about demons and stuff like that. Cheryl gets upset and screams about turning it off quite over the top. And that part's interrupted then by a tree that comes smashing through the window. Ash has a go at Scott about, like, why didn't you turn it off and all that kind of thing. And that's it for that part really as well. Yeah. It cuts to later on and everyone's kind of going to their bedrooms and stuff like that. Cheryl's on her own and she hears noises outside. And for reasons that are horror movie based, she goes to look and goes into the woods. I can hear you out there. I mean, even if you didn't think it was sinister, you don't do that.
Especially after the previous events of the evening, you'd be a little bit unsettled after all that.
Yes, so Cheryl gets attacked by trees. And this part.
This is obviously the bit that was cut quite heavily.
This would have been a troublesome scene because she's raped by trees.
And they show quite.
It's not
quite
short.
Implied.
It's not short. It's not short. You see a tree branch. Towards in between her legs. It's not short at all. But she manages to escape. This same sequence of events would happen in the sequel as well, Evil Dead 2. But there it ends in its death. Yeah. Here, she actually escapes and comes back to the cabin where they find her.
Just to find the key to the door. On top of the door frame. Which I don't know how they locked it from the outside. Yeah,
this is well done. You brought this up. So somehow, right, so she's being chased by the moving thing, basically. That whole thing is happening behind her. And the front door is now locked, yet the keys are back where they were to begin with, which we were like, what? How's that work? Why would you'd have them inside, you locked.
How would you lock it from outside?
And then what did you climb through a window? Why would you do that? Why didn't pop? It didn't make much sense. But she gets back in, close call and all that, and the rest are all like, she's like something in the woods. No one wants to believe her, obviously, but she's so incensed that she's desperate to leave. Ash is like, I'm going to take her. She's my sister. I'm going to take her back to town. Going to take her to town. They get in the car and they get to the bridge to find the bridge has been destroyed.
I love that
wrecked.
Yeah.
It is
curled up.
Like something smashed up through it and bent it that way. It's a good looking effect.
It's a good scare.
Yeah. Undone by a crap scare directly afterwards, which is Ash disappearing.
Oh, yeah.
So Ash just disappears. And Cheryl's, Ash, where are you? And then for some reason he comes out of a different angle. Yeah. Like the woods at the side for another jump scare attempt. Why? What?
Throw it in there.
Jesus Christ. Cheryl panics, we're not going to be able to leave, that kind of thing. At the end, back at the cabin, And that's why Ash kind of listens to more of the tape. He listens on headphones this time as well, which is a nice touch to kind of show that he's aware that I upset the girls beforehand. Yeah. Brilliant moments to follow coming up, though. One of the best moments was this card reading scene.
Oh, yeah.
What's to call it? So Linda and Shelley are playing cards, and they're joking around as if one of them can read the cards of the other, and that kind of thing. But Cheryl starts to call out the cards correctly from the other side of the room. Yeah. And in every time, like 5 or 6 in a row. Yeah. Which is incredible. She turns around and she's got a demonic face. She starts to levitate and, like, you know, all about, what's it called? We're going to kill you, going to destroy you, woke me up, that kind of thing. She then falls to the ground, kind of thing. And they're like, oh, is she okay? She wakes up and you get one of the more famous violent scenes, cringe-inducing moments. As she stabs Linda in the ankle with a pencil. You see it. Yeah, and you see it twisting and turning, that kind of thing. It's pretty fucking full on. What's called Ash gets knocked over, but eventually they get the better of Cheryl and lock her in the cellar. She's now fully transformed into like a demonic face and all that. And Cheryl, the actress that plays Cheryl, Ellen Sandwich, is having a fucking blast.
Yeah, I'd have good fun with it.
This is what we said at the start, where they turn it up and turn it on. Really, really impressive stuff. Of course, they don't know what to do. What would you know what to do and that kind of thing. Shelley, gets attacked while she's in the bedroom alone by the demonic thing. The one outside in the woods now seems to, I don't know if it's like a growing in strength thing.
Might be.
Or it's a mental thing.
You've opened the door to it now.
You've broken through their mind, so it smashes through the window and attacks Shelley. She becomes what we all now know is called a deadite, a demon, and attacks Scott. He actually knocks her into the fireplace. And panicking then, he pulls her out and like, it's like a great, like, she's a great, like, demonic line. Oh, thank you. I don't know what you'd have done if you left me in those hot coals. Like, it's proper.
I liked it.
It is good shit. It is good shit. But she obviously gets back up and starts attacking him. And Scott ends up using that dagger to sort of stab her. And what looks like, you think that dagger is like going to kill them because like they seem to sort of die and pus and gore explodes from the bodies. But it's not in the end at all. He ends up chopping her up with an axe in the end. After all that's gone down, Scott's had enough. He's going to hike back to town. He's going to leave the woods, and Ash is obviously against that. But basically, because Ash is trying to look after Linda, who's hurt from her ankle and asleep in the bedroom. But Scott basically, he says as much. Don't care.
Yeah, I'm going.
I don't care. I'm going. And off he goes. He will come back. He will come back fucked up because obviously there's no way out of here. No. When he does come back, you know, he basically says the trees attacked him, which is obviously what we saw earlier on. And there's no way of getting out alive. He seems to die on the couch there. It's believable because he is pretty messed up. The effect on him is pretty good.
Yeah,
you know,
I like that.
It is pretty good. Ash goes to check on Linda, sees her ankle, and her ankle starts to transform, and she's been possessed. Now, well, let's use her as the good example. The initial possession makeup of all the characters is wank.
Yeah.
Now, there's no arguing and disputing the low-budget nature of this movie. It is very, very low budget, as simple as that. But ultimately, when they're first possessed, all it is here's some dodgy makeup and here's some lenses.
Yeah.
And I think Linda's the worst of it because it just looks like her lipstick smeared and you put some eyeshadow under her, blue eyeshadow as well underneath that. Compared to when they fully become a demon, it's much, much better. Yeah. However, Linda as a demon is, I don't even know, she's the best thing in it. Maybe the best thing. Yeah. Because how she moves, so she like seems to move like she's a marionette doll. Her arm is often up like that as she's holding a weapon, but she's like that.
Jerky.
Yeah. With the biggest fucking grin on her face.
Very creepy.
Very, very, very good. You know, and Ash doesn't quite know how to deal with it because it's his girlfriend. And she also does this thing where she'll sit down cross-legged and laugh.
Yeah.
And twiddling her hair like that. Very, very effective. Very, very creepy. He does obviously eventually have no choice but to stab her with the same dagger. Thinks he's killed her. Doesn't want to can't chop her up. This is where we first get the inclination of a chainsaw in the Evil Dead films. As actually a chainsaw is going to dismember her, because she's sort of transformed back to looking like Linda normally. He can't quite do it. So he decides to bury her instead. Anybody that knows Evil Dead, that's a terrible idea. Because obviously she's back.
So we keep him down.
And she attacks him. She's full on demon now, demonic makeup and stuff like that. And he ends up knocking her head off with a shovel, decapitating her with a shovel. Back inside, Ash goes in a lot of trouble, and Cheryl has escaped. The cellar's open.
Busted open.
No idea how that happened, but it is what it is. So Ash goes down into the basement, planning basically, I presume, to kill Cheryl. We never really, there's nothing down there. And you kind of get one of the gorier scenes where like the pipes are bleeding now. Where before it was water, now it's blood, and it explodes all over him. He gets covered in blood. You get a lot of sequences. When we said about the movie stopping to a halt, these are your moments.
Yeah.
As they want to try and sell the idea of madness in Ash.
Yeah.
So you get a lot of like just sitting there, standing against a wall, close up his face, heavy breathing, focusing on other elements and stuff like that, looking in the mirror. Stuff that would happen in the sequel, but it'd always be used in a more way to lead to something else. This never really does, because ultimately it's about him trying to barricade himself in while Thingy is outside.
Yeah.
What's her name?
Linda.
I've forgotten. Linda's dead now. Linda, you can't head of Cheryl.
Cheryl. Yeah.
Cheryl. But he has to fight her off. Then Scott becomes a deadite and he fights him off. All looking pretty good as well. It is a busy night. We get a lovely eye gouging scene with Ash and Scott where he puts his thumbs into Scott's eyes.
We don't like eyes.
And then through an accident, the Book of the Dead, the Necronomicon, ends up in the fire and starts to burn. And you see that has effect on the demons as sort of smoke starts to come off them as if they're burning. This is what causes Ash to realise that he's got to burn the book. Yeah. Basically, if he burns the book, he'll be able to stop them. It's a well done sequence of events because he's basically he's trying to fight off Scott at the same time, Cheryl at the same time as well, while trying to drag this book closer using a chain, a necklace that he'd given Linda earlier on. It's pretty well done. But he does get the book in, and they basically stop dead.
Yeah, frozen.
Yeah, frozen and decompose effectively in rapid time.
Yeah, I like that.
It's a pretty good effect, don't you think?
I liked it.
Yeah, I think so too.
I'm not sure they filmed like food almost, like dyed food, and let it rot.
Really, and then sped the footage up to
That's
massive
what it felt
fast.
like. I feel like, when you see the sort of videos, this is how something decomposes, and just dyed it like hyper weird colours and just sped it up.
It is very impressive looking, and it continues because we also get like giant hands, like demonic hands that burst out of their stomachs, which is an amazing effect,
cool.
an amazing effect. And then like you hear sort of like the Join Us voice sort of echoing in the distance to imply it's been dealt with. And dawn then breaks. Now what a lot of people probably forget because of the Evil Dead 2 is this movie does not have a happy ending.
No.
As dawn breaks and Ash stumbles out of the cabin, obviously planning to, I don't know, head home thinking he's safe now, that kind of thing. The creature, the entity in the woods, wakes up on the opposite side of the cabin and basically flies towards him, smashes through the doors, and the film ends as Ash turns around and screams and the entity hits him, implying lots of things. Very interestingly, that exact same sequence of events would happen in Evil Dead 2, except we would actually see the result of that. Do you remember?
I haven't watched Evil Dead 2 for years.
So the entity does the same thing in the same set of events for Evil Dead 2. And instead, you kind of have this really cheesy scene where like Ash is being pushed through the forest at top speed while spinning round.
Oh, against trees and stuff. He hits
and so on. And then he gets dropped into like a puddle of wood. When he comes out, he's a demon. That is a demonic kind of force. And is it sunlight, being in the sun, that turns him back to Ash? Or is it dependent from his Linda that turns him back to normal Ash? One of the two.
Yeah,
I think it's one of the two. It might be a combination of both that turns him back to normal Ash. Whereas in this, it ends there. Obviously implying that he died because obviously there was never really a plan to follow this up kind of thing. And that's the Evil Dead. As a nasty, let's put it in conjunction with everything we've seen. It's hard because I've always seen this movie in a very different light. So now you're asking me to lump it amongst the nasties of one of them.
Yeah, it's odd.
It's odd.
It's I can see where the tree part would come in there because obviously
the tree part,
prolonged violence against women, rape, the hinting of rape, things like that. The goriness of it. Then yeah, but on the flip side, I've seen a lot worse.
I think we've watched worse so far. I think we've watched worse. I think, right, why in our heads we might still treat this one differently is because we cannot move away from the fact that the Evil Dead as a franchise, ignoring this movie, is slapstick horror.
Yeah.
Comedy horror. This is the one thing that isn't.
Yeah.
And when you think of it, even like the gory scenes, you're like, but it's just Evil Dead, right?
Yeah.
It's just silly horror.
So we watched when we were younger, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it very, very hard. But it is, when you break it down, it's the things like the prolonged tree rape. It's the ankle sequence of that. It's the close-ups of eyes popping and gouging and stuff like that. Decapitations. There's a lot of violence and gore in this against both men and women. And ultimately, you can see why in 1981 and following up in the years that would follow the Video Nasties scandal, why this would have, of course, ended up on it.
Yep.
It's, I said, very hard to picture right now, but it is what it is. Ultimately, it is a classic because of its effect on film.
Yeah.
Horror, and the fact that you will talk to so many people of a certain age group will say the same thing. I watched that when I was younger.
Yeah.
Which is really fucking weird. Really weird. And it's really interesting. If you did watch it younger, and it's been a very, very long time, have you seen the uncut version? Have you seen the uncut version? That is a big question mark. I hope to leave in a lot of people's mind now.
Yeah.
Because then you know you've got to go back and find it and watch it just to see. Truthfully, the only thing I think I noticed that I didn't really remember was maybe 2 seconds worth of footage, which was during the prolonged tree rape. Now, I think that was probably shorter in a cut version, but one particular part had a tree branch going straight into her vagina. That's shocked me when I watched it. And I said to you, I don't think I've ever seen that before.
Yeah. Which kind of makes sense why it would have been taken out.
That's absolutely. That's the only part I could clearly identify and say, that's got to be got to be part of the original cut. Got to be. Where on earth? 2 minutes worth elsewhere?
Yeah, very odd.
Maybe the ankle, and when the pencil goes in and then it cut.
Yeah. So
instead of that.
The prolonged part of that. Yeah.
Yep.
Snippets from each sort of violent
encounter. Yeah, the extended parts is cutting little parts of them, stuff out like that. Maybe cutting away with the eye gouging. Maybe cutting away when the head's decapitated. Very hard to identify because we obviously watch so much fucking horror. And these days, anything is game.
Yeah.
It's even harder. But there you go. There's the Evil Dead. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. You can check us out on gbhbl.com as well as on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and Tumblr. Go to Patreon to help us out over there. That's patreon.com/GBHBL, as well as Big Cartel, where you can find some of our merchandise. We have a podcast running on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts. And of course, if you like this video, do us a favour, hit the subscribe button and help the channel grow. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?